understanding AI is a big challenge for people, understanding what it can do, how to be aware of it. The implications, that can be scary. I think I'm hearing every day on CBC something about, especially elderly people that are now online, if not too much, falling for victims, the famous, grandchild scan and things like that. It's scary out there. So for those of you that look after a 7 or a 77-year-old, and you are the one brain all three of you share, like me, make sure you get the people understanding, what's happening out there. So today it's about stories, IT transformation stories. You gotta hear about them. You have to hear about them. You're here to hear about them. I found out I'm up against the great leadership speaker today, so thank you for the 6 or 7 people I don't know in the room, and to my Lenovo team for backing me here, or at least most of my team is here. So we could have made this about, we changed this customer over from one generation processor and VMware over to something else and saved them a ton of money. That stuff is important. It's interesting, it's cool, it's relevant, but I think at the end of a conference, you want to have a bit more fun and look at neat things that let you think outside the box. We just had a cool conversation with a customer who asked about our portfolio, and had to tell them we make laptops and desktops and everything else, but it's really the stuff you do with it that's way more interesting, and that's where we're putting a lot more development effort. So I'm going to be telling you about stories that ultimately are mostly based on Lenovo hardware, but the challenges they solve are not IT in nature. It's not about how can we move our bits around faster, or how can we spend less on licenses, or how can we recover from a disaster minutes, hours, days faster, that kind of stuff. It's not about that. It's about taking data that already exists in the real world. All the data, it's ultimately it's things we write down and things we say and things we see and things we eat that are recorded, which license plate went in and out of the parking lot, who came to the building, what food was ordered for lunch. All of those things, all of this is recorded and kept track of somehow, but to extract meaning from it, it's huge amounts of data, it needs a lot of processing power. So what we're looking at today is places where we've taken these huge amounts of data and made meaningful insights from it, and I think we should always try to do. We're talking about this. That's a link to the Lenovo AI Success Portal webpage. It's basically anything we've sold that has any level of AI with a customer that would let us publish it is in there, but there's some really neat ones. But I want to start with something that is deeply personal in nature, and talk about how we can take the same concepts and the same procedures to do things that can benefit our companies. If our company is a manufacturer that has competitors, or you are a hotel, or a political campaign, or an automobile manufacturer, a pharmaceutical company, or anything in between, there's a good chance it'll be relevant to you. So I did 2 things that kind of went part and parcel because they use the exact same data set. Lenovo's end of fiscal year is the end of March, and so by March 31st at midnight, I have to submit this big review. March 31st at 11, I was busy building the AI model to do it for me, and I got it done in time, which was nice. But I want to make it authentic and real and to prove a point, because I have my professional self, I have my personal, and I have a more anonymous one on social media and things like Reddit, right? But these are all things that I've said and most likely thought of authentically. Wanted to say and express because they meant something to me. So I went and extracted all of the things I have ever written that I could find. Every email I've sent, every personal, professional, every comment I've made, every Facebook message, everything that I've ever written down. And I scrubbed the data. And I said, well, here's me. And I cataloged it between the different places and everything else where I said it, and it's more professional. And then I said, create a model based on how this person speaks. And that's what it says there on my behalf, apparently. The other thing cool is that I had all of these things I've written with timestamps. And I said, I want to look at my life over the last 10 years. That's far back as I want to go. So maybe not everything I've ever written. And I said, let's analyze me a bit, And I have a lot more data and axes I did, but I said, I want to look at my overall emotional state. I call it happy and sad with 2 definers. My energy, that's how often I communicate. My speed, the time between my responses at the end of conversation, and generally kind of how upbeat I am and energetic, and there's also my mental flexibility. It's the how often I ask questions versus give answers, use a more rigid tone, a more combative or contrarian tone versus wanting to learn more and being receptive to new ideas and agreeing with people versus disagreeing. And that's me over the last 10 years. And I won't get into all of these massive swings because they're all pretty personal in nature. But that's the birth of my son right here. You know, your wife's pregnant, you're freaking out, your whole world's gonna change. You're like, oh shit, and then bam, your kid's born, and like everything changes. And then, hey, what's that? Early 2020. Yeah. Remember that? Boom! Everything sucks. You know? Then eventually things get better. And then my mom died out of nowhere. Like, bam! Everything sucks again. But then there's changes. There's things that happen over time. And I can tell you all the correlation between what happened in the real world versus what happened to the data. And this is about me. But you can take the exact same thing about your brand, your product, your political campaign, your film, your movie, your TV show, whatever it is. People are talking about it. And it's one thing to have phone surveys. This is Nanos calling, who are you going to vote for in 3 weeks? Shut up! But I might write about it. I'll comment on it. I'll discuss it. I'll chat with my friends and people about it. All the data is there. And it's very easy to go and extract all of this and run it through a tool like this and add filters for demographics, for region. And then correlate the success of your, the opinion of your brand, but also the success of projects. Are people talking about us more? Is there more buzz? Are people talking about it more in this new demographic we're trying to hit, be it a certain age group or a region? What's happening in that region with those people? How is it impacting us? How can we latch onto this? And it's very hard to do that through proactive collection of data. It's taking things that are already in existence and applying AI to them and making the data say things. And this could be by auditing your internal communications at work. Are people happy? Are they happy with the new comp plan? What about these new changes, this back to work thing? What are my employees really thinking about it? And that could be through internal Teams messages. There are some privacy things, of course, but that's for you to decide what the laws may be. And what they're saying online in forums. There's a lot of anonymous sites or people complaining about their workplace. And if you're a big company, it's a good chance there's probably a subreddit about Amazon employees or anything like that to say, what's happening? What are they really thinking about this? And you can pull all that data and say, oh, we implemented the new back to work policy. You have to stay till 6 o'clock on Fridays. Bam, it's gonna go down. That's pretty obvious. But if you look at the granularity of it, just over time, what are people saying? Consistent efforts, especially on political campaigns where you've long term, are we getting them? Or how are we doing in this particular market share, this demographic? You can go nuts with the data you can do with it. It's not just about sentiment analysis or getting someone to do your homework for you. I think did a pretty good job. If I read that, I probably believe I wrote it. And what can that do for your business? Is it answering check queries? Is it taking all of the data you have, all your internal policies and your documentations, and creating different tones to speak to different types of employees? Do you have an older, more formal, mature employee that prefers something very documented and official? Do you want to get a young, Gen Z, Gen Alpha employee whenever they start working? Get my 7-year-old to work soon. The AI minds, how does it speak to them? Does it use emojis? Does it use memes? It can do that. It can be the same information. It speaks to them. Alleviate training. Talk to your employees. Fine-tune these models. Figure out which ones are working, which ones aren't. Do A/B tests. All the data already exists. It's what you do with it that is important. So that's kind of a whole overall message, and I do want to go through some specific examples because of the stories you have to hear about, as per the sign on the door. Some of you may have seen this one already. I did it last year. There's a big sound effect that goes with it, but the AV guys might not like it. And this is a true example of a steel recycling facility in northern Alberta. It's cold up there. It's cold, crappy, and no one likes it. Well, I guess they do, they live there. But point being, this is a very traditional, old-fashioned business, right? They get old shopping carts and they melt them and turn them into new shopping carts, and old cars and all sorts of other scrap metals. It's in the middle of nowhere. They do not have good connectivity. They don't have a data center on site. They've got a bunch of cranes and shredders and smelters. However, it's dangerous to be doing that. And with the major danger in this industry is explosives and propane tanks. Because if you take an old car and crush it, sure, maybe some oil and gas will leak out. But a pressurized container, especially propane, not just the barbecue ones, but the more large industrial ones for heaters and cooking and things like that. The problem is when you take that and you put it up, you don't realize it, it's hidden or no one's paying attention, your operator's hung over, whatever it may be. That goes in a machine and it's gonna go boom! And you don't want that because it can hurt people badly. It could damage the machinery, it could be insurance claims, and you have to go and deal with all these people afterwards. So how can we solve that with AI? You think, you can get AI out of my crane and, Castor, Alberta, or wherever this thing was? But we did. Because there's already a ton of video surveillance on this site for safety and security and auditing and everything else. So we said, what if we could tap into that? Great. AI, we've got to run a big model. It takes a lot of computing power. We don't have a data center here. We can't put an air-conditioned thing. We've got like one desktop. So we said, let's put it on the edge. Let's put the actual data center caliber AI, NVIDIA, Tesla GPU directly on the crane. And you're like, oh, that thing's big, it needs an air conditioner. No, it doesn't. If anyone saw my thing this morning, I was sitting on the server. That's exactly what we used. That can go from like -5 to 55 Celsius with the GPU in it. It can take a punch, and it's fully hardened. It's got dust filters and everything else. It's not even that noisy. So you can have that thing inside the crane, all the video feeds that are already going to the operator there, but you can train it with a model running locally on the machine that can take all that video data in, which again already exists, and alert people. Looks like a tank, looks like a tank, looks like a tank. Even if there's supposed to be tanks there because people are looking for them, go get that, cool, collect the tank. And as it gets closer and closer to the machines, it's a tank, I should really check it out. To a certain point where it's like, that's a tank, I'm shutting it down. Because it's one thing to shut down, hey, got a tank. It's something that looks like a tank. Okay, cool, restart, we're good. If we can prevent that, that's a ton of money saved in the long run. A machine like that costs, with a GPU, like less than $10,000. And this was all built off a public model that was just fine-tuned for the types of environments, the snow, the dirt, the lighting conditions, and the types of tanks that are most likely to be in northern Alberta. Really, really inexpensive solution. It just basically flashed a red light, and it's got a microcontroller output in it too, which can interface with the CAN bus on the machines to say, stop. Not an expensive thing to do, kind of developed in-house by one of our partners. Cheap and easy. All it's doing is detecting something that shouldn't be there, or should be there, and giving an alert, right? The data, is it there? Can we see it? What do we want with it, right? It's not an IT process or story. I mean, ultimately it is, because someone's got to do all that stuff. But it is a workplace safety and efficiency and continuous operations issue. This is the domain and the concern of recycling operations and not IT. But there's got to be a crossover somewhere. And that's where all this has become really interesting. Another one that runs a very similar type of system, pizza and lasagna are the same ingredients, is in commercial fishing. Again, a boat is not a data center. When you're out in the ocean, you do not have very good connectivity. Starlink's the thing now, but generally speaking, you don't want to be taking all your video footage and all your data and constantly going back up and down. Latency, clouds, things get in the way, and you often want results right away. The reason being is that in commercial fishing, now a lot of the processing is done directly on the boat. It will sort the fish by size, by species, it will cut the heads off, it'll can them, it'll cook them all right there. You go with an empty boat, you come back with cans full of tuna. It may not be that good, but point being, a lot of the processing happens on-prem, inside the boat. But you need processing power there, especially on these computer vision type things. Because you don't want to be catching the wrong species, right? You don't want to deal with these guys, because catching the wrong species is illegal, it's bad for the environment. You catch the wrong thing, you can't eat it or sell it. I mean, it might be delicious, but point being, you're not supposed to. And that's what you got to watch out for. Again, it's sustainable fishing operations. It's keeping, keeping the species sustainable and being able to fish them in the future and not overfish. And also understanding where the good places are to fish and tracking that data over time. So that you can send your trawlers to where you can predict the fish are going to be that your competitors won't, and you can come back with a higher catch. It costs the same amount of money to catch a little bit of fish as a lot of fish, but it's when you get back, you can make a whole lot more profit. I spent a lot of time fishing as a kid. I will never get in a small boat again. So we did the same thing here. And for those of you looking right now, you may notice that there is a dolphin, a baby beluga, and a mermaid on there. You don't want to be catching those. So again, lightweight model directly on the boat. Running a T4 GPU, you get a way faster one now. You can do this with the NPC2 or workstation or even a little bit smaller edge node. We have someone at our booth. That was the model we used for everything. You can stick up cameras on there and it can say, throw that back! Or at least throw it back while it's still alive, or at least before we get caught, because you'll get inspected. I've been inspected on the Ottawa River bass fishing before, okay? Like, these people are out there, especially in the commercial space, because this kind of fishing matters a lot more than, any small fish locally, but they're out there. Get your fishing license, it's like $10. But again, this is all happening on-prem. We're not taking that video and sending it off to God knows where. And then a few minutes later, once the cloud's clear, it's like, oh, you shouldn't have done that, Her name was Ariel, And it's the same thing in farming. A lot of this is about animals, by the way, and eating them. But pig farming, right? Factory farming. Like, don't give them names. There's thousands of them. They all kind of look the same, right? Because these are your products. And as we've seen with bird flu and things like that, one gets sick, they're all sick, and you gotta kill them. You gotta destroy them. It's unsafe. It's dangerous. But sometimes they don't get some big pandemic type illness. It's more bacterial in nature. And you treat that with antibiotics. The problem is you just keep putting antibiotics everywhere. They don't become useful anymore, which is dangerous because there is a big bacterial infection and our antibiotic supply doesn't work. Well, it's useless. It's also expensive to do. And what else is expensive? Veterinary medicine, extremely expensive. Thing is, what if we use AI to solve this? And we do that just like we do with our kids, right? You just can't go around sticking thermometers in all of their mouths. I found that's not how you take a pig's temperature, by the way, after I gave this presentation last time. But it's hard to do and expensive. But as a parent that you're not eating enough, you're sleeping more, or there's something you can see visually. Again, the data's already there, there's cameras everywhere. If you can look at the model of a healthy pig versus an unhealthy pig and say, you can identify them all, you can track them, tag them. You say, that one's sleeping too much, or it's not eating enough, or it's doing other bodily functions outside of the norm. I should go look at that one. I can treat the one animal and figure out what's wrong with them before the disease spreads. It gets in the food supply, the water supply, they're coughing on each other, etc. And that's where it gets really dangerous. You still have to treat them, but if there's an outbreak, they're your product, they're gone. So it not only makes veterinary care less expensive, it's also adding to a kind of long-term, biodiversity and antibiotic resistance thing we're trying to prevent, which is an issue in hospitals and care homes and things like that. Very dangerous. So again, using AI to do that. And a barn is not a data center, but edge computing can do that. This won a ton of awards. It's with a company called Circuit in Sweden. The next one, my apologies to all the vegans out there, but it's one of my favorite ones. Again, it's about meat. This just happened, I swear. And we were working with a big slaughterhouse operator, or food processing plant chain in the U.S. They're a global company, but this was in the U.S. in particular. And you get the animals, and it all goes to this, the next stage of factory farming, which is factory slaughtering. But generally speaking, your butcher operators are not particularly skilled workers, and they just have to get the job done. And you do it or you don't, right? There's no benefits, there's no bonuses or spiffs or commission structure, right? But what if you could? But how are you going to monitor everyone's work? Are you going to send a supervisor around and go, hey, nice cut there, because you get a whole lot more money per gram for a T-bone than you do for like dog food meat. And it's all about carving it in the right way, getting the bigger and thicker cuts all at once. And basically, when that thing goes to the next step, you want to have as much bone visible as possible. You don't want any of the red meat left, any other fleshy bits we want to eat, because the more you get off at the different stages of production, the more money that cow is worth per gram. The same cow could be worth $1,000 of dog food, or it could be $20,000 of steak. What you want is the steak, and it all comes down to the quality of the cuts and the proficiency of your abattoir workers. So what if we could make it fun for them? What if we could find a way of chopping up animals all day? More fun, right? How? How can it be more fun? You gamify the experience. And what if we could make it almost like a first-person shooter, What if you're in there and you get different knife choices, right? And you're like, well, there it is, there's the T-bone, get the T-bone, Get 3 porterhouses within 5 minutes. And you can keep track of all these things. And even if it's just for grading your employees' performance, keep the best, get rid of the rest, promote them, whatever it may be. Or if you can say, if you reach a cumulative score of this, or if you increase your yields by a certain amount over time, you can gamify it. And it can be small prizes, but small incentives work. There's competition between the teams, between managers, between factories, whatever it may be. That can foster teamwork, greater cohesion within your employees, get you better cuts overall at a relatively low cost. You can win concert tickets, or a case of beer, or all the barbecue sauce you can handle, whatever it may be, right? You can do that, incentivize it. And I would think of that entire structure as calling these things bonus points, right? These are real, and maybe it's not just abattoir workers, right? It could be any other production facility. It's worker safety on the job, or how long it takes someone at a coffee shop to make a coffee, or take the fewest steps between going from this to here. And if you say, hey, this manager decided to move the creamer or whatever it may be, they can do fewer steps, serve more people faster. I can gamify everything in the workplace because I think I really like competing with my colleagues. I'm sure a lot of us do, and I think a lot of employees do too. So I can gamify, use the data that's already there, and present it in a way that fosters competition and provides a clear incentive structure. I just got something pop up on my screen. It's pretty exciting. I didn't see the second half of the phrase, so it's either like the best or the worst news. Look at my sentiment analysis later on. Another thing we did too was with potholes. Potholes exist in the real world, right? It's very expensive to go drive around and catalog. You gotta pay people to do it. Put 4 people in a car and they're driving around. Like, was that a pothole? I don't know. Was it? Was that a crack? What would you grade? Like a big or small? Boom! Next thing you know, you're over the next pothole. Expensive to do. So we said, hey, all this data is already there, and you're already driving over these roads with your municipal vehicles. So what if we were to do cameras on the vehicles themselves and record everything? But instead of keeping the data all in the vehicle, you get back to headquarters, you plug in the hard drive, run the analysis, because most data is a good road. You're trying to find the bad spots, not the good spots. So what if we could drive and they could look at everything all the time? But then when it sees something bad, it just keeps the GPS coordinate, loads it into the city's GIS system. It can take a photo or a video of that particular pothole and also plot it on the map that already exists. It costs you nothing to go and collect this outside of the hardware and then the meager data fees to get the data to and from. You're already driving there with your dump trucks, your police cars, your school buses. So you can collect all the data, process it in real time, so you're not huge amounts of data to look at, and plot it, and that again becomes part of your long-term data strategy. Where do I plan my roads? How do I budget road repairs? How can I see that the number of potholes on the roads based on the weather eventually hits the repair threshold? Did the contractors we hired for this road versus this one in the same city, why are these falling apart more than others? Can we ban them from a future RFP or take a bigger bribe? There's a lot of ways we can do it, and it's all happening with just putting stuff on trucks. One of our big famous use cases, which is like 5-6 years old now, is at Kroger or grocery stores in the States, and it's all through the self-checkouts. This is the big one about money, and these are tons and tons of these online. But it's preventing the people from cheating or gaming the self-checkout counters. Because a lot of those were just based on barcode readers and scales. So it's like, oh, it's vegetables you're buying? Cool. What are they? Potatoes that are like 25 cents a pound? Great. And I'll put my big fat steak on there, right? And it's like, cool, that's a $3 potato, put it in the bag and the weight matches, everyone's happy. Because I covered up the barcode on it, right? And they're the ways you can cheat it, There's so many ways you can cheat those self-checkout counters, but not if you're using cameras. It's a lot harder to do with a camera. Are you scanning the right thing? Is it what you say it is? Are you purposely putting one item inside of another to scan it? Some very lightweight objects cost a lot of money. If you could stash that inside of something else, inside the top of a Kleenex box, it shouldn't be there, So some of those things, it's kind of annoying. $MI uses similar software. Place the item, scan it again. Wait for it intended. Like it sucks, but at the end of the day, the cash process is faster. They make more money. They saw ROI on this way faster than they thought they would. Because the average Kroger grocery store, which is like an IGA or a Metro, gets something like $270,000 robbed a year. Yeah, of product. And that's a lot. That's per location. Yeah, it's a lot. They might say somewhere in there. But average retailers using $500K per store to shrinkage. It wasn't 270, it was 500K. Because the solution was 270K. So it paid for itself very quickly in 6 months. They were looking for 1 year ROI, so they rolled it out everywhere. So this is big. A lot of use cases on this, and again, this is all done kind of at the edge. Not in the same way we use those little small ruggedized servers. This is the more traditional 1U, the GPU unit, but we call it at the edge. It's not going to the outside world into their cloud. And I've got a few minutes left. The other 2 cool things we've done, because I really like race cars. One's with NASCAR. We do have a NASCAR team. NASCAR is really old school in a lot of respects. Like you have to change every single bolt when you change the wheel, and they have a 4-speed manual transmission. And you're not allowed any tech in the pits. In the pit in the garage, like where you're working on your team, yeah, use the tech you want. But when you're actually on the race, you're not allowed anything more complicated than a jack, an air gun to change the tires, and a can of fuel. Those are the 3 things you're allowed. Outside of safety things like turning the car off remotely or whatever if there's a fire. But in terms of race operations, it is completely manual, old school, and it's all done by feel. How much fuel you put in the car, you are not allowed to measure that. You can't measure how much fuel you put in the car. You can't have a gauge on the filler neck. You can't have a dial. It is against the rules and the spirit. The spirit of Charlotte. We had our kickoff last year at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. It was pretty cool. So we said, how can we use AI in this? Because we're not allowed, first of all. How can we figure out, how can we use AI somehow on our Lenovo race car to show that AI can bring a revolution to industries? So here's what we did. We recorded people using NASCAR-style gas cans. And we recorded them like 1,000 times. In the heat of the moment, how much it's sloshing, running around, I'm sticking in this thing. But instead of being NASCAR, it was a measuring cup. Or like a big measuring cup, or there's probably a technical term for that. But we figured out, depending on the angle, how long you're standing there, because you can't radio the guy, he's got to count like Mississippi's in his head, right? How much fuel he's putting in. Because every extra milliliter of fuel you put in the car that you don't burn during the race slows you down. If you don't put enough fuel in, you either run out of gas, or you have to drive more conservatively to not burn it all. So we want to know exactly how much fuel we need to burn to win the race. How can we stay in the absolute top of the power band through every corner? How much fuel we're burning, so you can calculate that pretty easily afterwards. And then to train the guy based on the model to know exactly how much fuel he's going to put in based on our analysis of the time and the angle and the standing and the temperature and all the other environmental conditions, how long he's got to stand there and go. So we cross the line, ideally in first place. We've got about that much gas left in the tank. Formula One's a bit different. It can all be super duper high tech, and they can tell you which buttons to push, and it's like PlayStation controller from hell with a million buttons on it. But that's just one neat thing, and it's taking something super old school and staying within the rules of what you can do with it, but putting the using AI somewhere in the back end to get the results to win races. And the last one, I'm so glad people finally know our name brand. That's around Formula One, where you will see our name. I'm sure we paid a lot of money for it. But the one thing we do is we have a rolling data set we bring to every race. Formula One travels all over the world, and give or take every 2 weeks, they set up shop and run a 300,000-400,000 person event, and that requires a data set. And we do that for the broadcast. So all of the cameras go through this, they're processed, we add all the graphics in real time. And the biggest thing is drop frames. And we're using AI in real time to simulate the drop frames so that we can get it out there faster, have more camera angles, provide more content on F1 TV. You can look at all the different cameras, looking at things like 3D cameras that give on Google Earth, but doing that processing in real time. So you can sit in the race car and like look over, during a corner, are they going to pass, that kind of stuff. That requires a ton of computing power, and that's all done by Lenovo, which is kind of cool. And the final one is around, safety. We have a partner called Cognition, and they do facial recognition for good or bad actors or everything in between at places like casinos and hotels and police stations and hospitals to identify your VIP clients. So they walk through the door, you can alert and say, VIP coming up, here's his name, make sure you do the thing he likes, bring him this, prepare the drink, prepare the coffee, whatever. Or it could be, in this case, it was a private school, really fancy one in San Diego. And they want to make sure that, and identify people in your school grounds, and also in the case of, high-profile celebrity divorces, you don't want the wrong parent showing up. You're not allowed to come here, it was on the news. And you can alert the parents for custody battles and make sure this person is authorized to get them. You say you're their grandmother, really? And usually parents should tell them that the grandma's coming. But it's about knowing who's on premises, should they be there, should they not be there, and treat the staff accordingly. To prepare them for what comes next in the human world. The human world is what matters, the data's out there, and those are some of the success stories that you had to know. So, thanks for coming.